Outwitting the Devil. Part 2. At one point in the interrogation, Hill asks the devil how many people he controls. The answer he gets is a number, 98 out of every 100. Now you can dismiss that as theater, and it probably is, but it's worth sitting with the shape of the claim because it's a strange thing to boast about. He isn't claiming to have corrupted 98% of humanity. There's no suggestion these are bad people. Most of them are decent, hardworking, well-intentioned. That's the unsettling part. Whatever it is that separates the 98 from the 2, it isn't morality and it isn't effort. It's something quieter. And in part 1, we named the beginning of it. Drifting, living without consciously pointing your mind at anything. But drifting on its own doesn't explain the number, because drifting is reversible. Anyone can wake up on a Tuesday and decide to change direction. The question is why so few of them are still walking in that direction by March. That's what this episode is about. Not how the trap opens, how it closes. Hill's name for it is hypnotic rhythm. The language is strange. The idea isn't. What you repeatedly allow becomes easier to repeat. What's easy to repeat becomes familiar. What's familiar starts to feel natural. And what feels natural stops getting questioned. Which means the biggest threat to self-mastery isn't weakness, it's familiarity. Picture a field with no path across it. The first time you cross, you're pushing through waist-high grass. It's slow, awkward. You come back the next day and the day after. The grass flattens and a path appears. And soon you stop considering other routes entirely. Not because you decided this one was best, but because it's there. Thoughts create tendencies. Tendencies create actions. Actions become patterns. Patterns become habits. And eventually the habit starts directing the person who built it. Habit psychology explains the machinery here better than Hill could in 1938. The brain is constantly hunting for ways to spend less effort. If every action demanded full conscious attention, an ordinary day would be unbearable. So repeated behavior gets automated. This is enormously useful, right up until the behavior being automated is one that's working against you. Check your phone whenever you're bored. Eventually, boredom itself becomes the trigger. Avoid hard work whenever you feel uncertain. Eventually, uncertainty triggers avoidance. Eat when you're stressed. Complain when something goes wrong. Spend when you feel dissatisfied. Seek reassurance when you doubt yourself. Each one is trivial on its own, but repetition is teaching your mind a rule. When I feel this, I do that. And once the rule is automatic, you forget you're the one who taught it. That's why change feels so disproportionately hard. You're not changing in action. You're standing in a field trying to ignore a path you've walked 400 times. Hill's answer is environment, and he means something broader than most people do. Because you don't build habits in isolation, you absorb them. From what your family expects, from what your friends do, from what your colleagues tolerate, from what your culture repeats often enough to sound obvious, and now from something Hill never saw. Your phone, your feeds, your notifications, your recommendations, your endless supply of other people's thinking. So here's the working definition. Your environment isn't where you live. Your environment is whatever repeatedly reaches your attention. And whatever repeatedly reaches your attention gets a vote on what you consider normal. Put someone in the middle of a circle of 5 people. One complains constantly, one spends impulsively, one mocks ambition, one avoids responsibility, one lives entirely for the next pleasant hour. Nothing dramatic has to happen. He doesn't have to admire them. He just has to stay there. Gradually, certain behaviors become ordinary. Certain excuses become reasonable. Certain limits become believable. The walls of his world move inward, quietly, without a single confrontation. That's the real power of environment. It changes your standards without asking your permission. There's a concept in psychology called social proof. When we're unsure what to do, we look at what everyone else is doing. Usually that's sensible. If a room full of people suddenly runs for the exit, this is a poor moment to think independently. But it becomes dangerous when we outsource judgment permanently, because common behavior isn't good behavior. It's just common. Hill's demand is that you examine ideas instead of inheriting them. Why do I believe this? Where did that assumption come from? Would I still want this if nobody could see it? Is this my standard or one I absorbed? And those questions get uncomfortable quickly because sometimes the answer is that a thing you'd filed under personality turns out to have been adaptation. You learned to stay quiet because speaking up used to attract criticism. You learned not to take risks because everyone around you was frightened of uncertainty. You learned to put things off because avoidance brought instant relief. You learned to doubt yourself because somebody said it enough times that eventually you took over saying it for them. Not every voice in your head started with you. Part of self-mastery is working out which ones have earned the right to stay. Underneath most of this is fear. The 6 hill lists, all running the same play. They narrow behavior. Stand in front of an open door. On the other side is uncertainty. Maybe opportunity. Maybe humiliation. You genuinely don't know. Fear says, stay here. So you stay. And immediately something happens. Relief. The discomfort drops. That relief is the whole problem. Because your brain has just learned that avoidance works. So next time, avoidance is slightly more attractive. This is fear building its own rhythm. Not because you're weak, because avoidance pays out immediately every single time. You escape the discomfort now and make yourself slightly less able to handle it later, which explains something people get badly wrong about confidence. I'll start when I feel ready. I'll speak when I'm confident. I'll publish when criticism stops frightening me. But if you're waiting for fear to leave before you move, you'll wait indefinitely. Confidence is usually the consequence of evidence, not the requirement for it. You act while uncertain. You survive. Your mind logs it. You act again. The mountain doesn't shrink. You just become someone who's used to climbing. Here's the part that makes this hopeful rather than depressing. 2 wheels, both at rest. You push the first toward avoidance. You push the second toward deliberate action. Neither moves easily at first. Keep pushing, and the first becomes fear, avoidance, relief, more avoidance. The second becomes discomfort, action, evidence, self-trust. Both are loops. Both get easier with repetition. You are not choosing whether to build momentum. You're only choosing the direction, which is why one bad day matters far less than people think, and why a repeated mediocre week matters far more. Eating badly once won't define your health. Skipping one session won't define your body. Losing one morning won't cost you your future. But every repeated behavior is a small vote for what should become normal. And once something is normal, it no longer costs you anything to maintain. So discipline isn't only forcing yourself through hard things. It's deciding deliberately what gets to become familiar. There's one more floor to this. Repetition doesn't just shape behavior. It shapes identity. Promise yourself you'll get up early. Ignore the alarm. One morning means nothing. But after 8 months, you start saying, I'm not a morning person. Start things and abandon them repeatedly, and eventually, I never finish anything. Repeated procrastination becomes, I'm lazy. Repeated fear becomes, I'm not a confident person. Watch what just happened. A behavior became a description. The description became an identity. And now the identity reinforces the behavior. Because if I believe I'm someone who never follows through, abandoning the next project costs me nothing psychologically. It's consistent. It's who I am. The prison just gained another wall. This is why casual self-labeling is so expensive. A pattern is something you did. An identity is something you are. Patterns can be interrupted. But once a pattern becomes an identity, changing it starts to feel like betraying yourself. So separate them deliberately in the language you use. Not, I'm undisciplined, but I've repeatedly practiced undisciplined behavior. Those sound almost identical. Psychologically, they're nothing alike. One describes a person, the other describes a habit. And Hill doesn't think willpower solves this, because your environment keeps feeding the pattern while you fight it. Try to focus while every distraction stays within arm's reach. Try to think independently while consuming other people's opinions all day. Try to build ambition surrounded by people who find effort embarrassing. Try to become calm on a diet of outrage. You're pushing a rock uphill while your environment pushes back down. Sometimes self-mastery isn't about becoming stronger. It's about removing unnecessary resistance. Try to stop eating biscuits with the packet beside your desk. Every hour you have to win. Move them somewhere inconvenient. Same person, same willpower, far fewer battles. Because discipline is a finite resource, and every unnecessary decision is another chance for impulse to win one. So the better question isn't how do I become more disciplined? It's what in my environment keeps training me not to be? Look at your room. What behavior does it make easy? Look at your phone. What behavior does it make effortless? Look at your circle. What attitudes does it make normal? Look at your feed. What emotion are you rehearsing every day? Anger, envy, urgency, comparison? Because consumption isn't passive. Whatever you repeatedly take in becomes the raw material your thinking is made of. Think of your attention as the front door of a house. Most people are careful about their actual homes. They lock the door. They decide who comes in. They don't let strangers wander into the living room and start rearranging the furniture. But mentally, a notification appears. Come in. An angry stranger online. Come in. A meaningless argument. Come in. An algorithm decides what deserves the next 20 minutes. Come in. And then people wonder why their inner life feels so loud. Self-mastery requires being a gatekeeper. Not because the world outside is evil, because attention is limited, and whatever keeps capturing it eventually steers you. There's a reason the fear of criticism sits underneath all of this. Humans are social animals. Acceptance isn't vanity. It used to be survival. So criticism registers as far more threatening than it is. And that creates a genuine conflict. You want to change, but change threatens the version of you other people have agreed to. You've always been the one who's bad with money. Now you're saving. People notice. You've always come out on Saturday. Now you're working on something. People notice. You've always gone along with the group. Now you have your own opinion. People notice. The behavior isn't the only thing changing. Your position in the group is changing. And sometimes people will pull you back. Not maliciously. Familiarity is comfortable for everyone, including them. So the moment you stop drifting, friction appears, which is exactly why you need to know why you're changing. Because if you don't, social pressure will decide whether you continue. Hill's non-drifter isn't someone who ignores everybody. That's just a different kind of foolishness. Listen widely, think carefully, and then decide deliberately. That order matters. Because independent thought doesn't mean rejecting conventional wisdom on principle. If you disagree with the crowd automatically, the crowd is still driving. You're just facing the other way. Real independence means neither agreement nor disagreement is automatic. You evaluate, you choose, and then you carry the consequences. That last part is the uncomfortable one, and it's the real reason drifting feels safer. Responsibility removes excuses. If the decision was yours, so is the outcome. The drifter can always point somewhere else. My circumstances, my parents, my boss, the economy, my luck, other people. And some of that is fair. Hill pushes personal responsibility further than the evidence really supports. Circumstances matter, health matters, money matters, opportunity matters, and pretending otherwise is its own kind of fantasy. But there's still a distinction worth keeping. Influence isn't authorship. You don't choose the cards. You do choose how deliberately you play them, not with one enormous act, with deliberate repetition in the opposite direction. If the pattern is procrastination, practice starting before you feel ready, not finishing, starting. 5 minutes. You're teaching a new sequence. Discomfort, then action. If the pattern is distraction, build small windows where boredom isn't immediately medicated. If the pattern is breaking promises to yourself, make smaller promises, then keep them. If the pattern is fear of criticism, deliberately do small things that might be judged, and find out that disapproval is uncomfortable rather than fatal. If your environment is training the wrong behavior, redesign it before demanding more willpower. Put the book where you'll see it. Put the phone where you won't. Make the good thing obvious and the destructive thing inconvenient. None of this looks impressive. That's the point. The rhythm wasn't built dramatically either. There's one idea underneath all of this that changes how you hear the rest. You are always practicing something, even when you think you're doing nothing. Avoiding the difficult conversation is practice. Reaching for your phone in every quiet moment is practice. Keeping your word is practice. Breaking it is practice. Your repeated behavior is constantly teaching your habits, your nervous system, and your self-image what to expect from you. So maybe the question isn't, who do I want to become? That's too far away to be useful. Ask the closer one. What am I practicing becoming? Because the answer already exists. It's sitting in your ordinary days in plain sight. And that's the strange comfort in Hill's idea. The mechanism has no preference. Repeat fear, and fear gains momentum. Repeat courage, and courage becomes ordinary. The same process that builds the prison builds the way out of it, which brings us back to the field. However many hundreds of times you've walked one path, the grass on the other route hasn't been cemented over. It's just tall. In part 3, the 7 principles Hill says make a person almost impossible to control.